U.S. federal arrests over New Year's bombing plot in California raise new questions about domestic threats. Federal authorities say they have arrested 4 people accused of planning a coordinated bombing campaign on New Year's Eve in Southern California. The case matters right now because the alleged plan was timed for midnight, when fireworks and crowds could have masked chaos and slowed response. The central tension is familiar and still unresolved: how to stop political violence early, before anyone is hurt, without treating broad, lawful dissent as suspect by default. This report lays out what authorities say happened, what is still unclear, and why the details of this investigation are likely to ripple beyond California. It also explains what changes for public safety planning as the calendar approaches a high-risk holiday window. The story turns on whether prevention can stay precise. Key points. Federal prosecutors say 4 defendants were arrested on December 12th in the Mojave Desert area while taking steps toward building and testing explosive devices for a New Year's Eve attack. The defendants are charged with conspiracy and possession of an unregistered destructive device. Prosecutors have said additional charges could follow. Authorities allege the plan aimed to detonate multiple devices at midnight on New Year's Eve at 5 or more locations tied to 2 U.S. companies in the greater Los Angeles area. Officials say the defendants used encrypted communications and took operational steps meant to reduce detection and forensic traceability. Authorities also allege the group discussed future attacks targeting federal immigration agents and vehicles. The case is likely to intensify debates over domestic extremism labels, preemptive arrests, and how much the public should be told about disrupted plots. Background: the New Year's bombing plot in California. According to federal authorities, the 4 defendants are Audrey Eileen Carroll, Zachary Aaron Page, Dante Gaffield, and Tina Lai. Prosecutors allege they were affiliated with a group calling itself the Turtle Island Liberation Front, described by officials as anti-capitalist and anti-government. Authorities say the alleged plot was detailed in an 8-page handwritten plan titled Operation Midnight Sun. The plan, as described by officials, called for placing devices in backpacks and setting them to detonate simultaneously at midnight on New Year's Eve. Officials have said the targets were tied to 2 companies and involved multiple sites in the Los Angeles metropolitan area. Authorities have not publicly identified the companies, describing them only in broad terms consistent with large logistics operations. Federal officials have emphasized that agents moved in before any functional explosive device was completed. In other words, the government's case rests on alleged planning, coordination, acquisition of components, and early-stage assembly efforts rather than a completed device or an attempted detonation. The defendants are presumed innocent, and the claims will be tested in court. Analysis: political and geopolitical dimensions. This case lands in a political climate where domestic terrorism language is both powerful and contested. Officials have used sweeping terms to describe the alleged plot, while the charging documents at this stage focus on conspiracy and destructive device allegations. That difference matters. Labels shape public perception and policy response, but charges determine what prosecutors must prove. In court, the government will likely concentrate on concrete actions: written planning, coordination, travel, purchases, communications, and steps taken toward constructing devices. The alleged ideological framing also risks spillover effects. When authorities describe a small alleged cell as part of a wider worldview, public debate can quickly flatten into crackdown versus ignore it. The harder question is operational. What indicators justified intervention here, and can those indicators be applied narrowly enough to avoid sweeping and lawful activism? Economic and market impact. Even a foiled plot can change the cost and posture of security. If prosecutors are right that logistics-linked sites were in the crosshairs, the private sector. Takeaway is blunt. High-throughput nodes are soft targets with outsized economic leverage. In the short term, companies in transportation, warehousing, and retail logistics may increase visible security around holiday periods, particularly New Year's Eve. In the longer term, firms may quietly invest more in perimeter hardening, camera analytics, staff training, and rapid coordination channels with law enforcement. None of that is free. The economic impact is less about lost inventory and more about a rising baseline of security overhead and operational friction in an already time-sensitive supply chain. Social and cultural fallout. Cases like this tend to produce two simultaneous reactions. One is fear, the sense that everyday public places are vulnerable during celebrations. The other is suspicion, pressure to treat certain political identities as inherently risky. Both reactions can be exploited. Bad actors want overreaction as much as they want headlines, because social fracture multiplies impact even when plans fail. A second cultural fault line is the blur between rhetoric and violence. Plenty of people hold radical views without committing crimes. The public interest question is where the line is crossed into operational planning. Prosecutors will try to show that this case crossed that line decisively through alleged concrete steps, not just talk. Technological and security implications. Authorities say the defendants used encrypted communications. That detail is not new, but it is operationally important. Modern plotting often blends in with normal digital life. Private messaging, small group chats, and ordinary consumer purchases. For law enforcement, the challenge is less about one magic interception and more about stitching small signals into a coherent risk picture. That can involve confidential sources, surveillance, and interagency coordination. It can also raise civil liberties concerns if broad collection becomes the norm rather than the exception. For the public, the practical reality is that disrupted plots often become visible only after arrests, when the government can choose what to reveal without compromising ongoing methods. That can leave a trust gap. People want reassurance, but they also want transparency that rarely arrives in real time. What most coverage misses, the most overlooked factor, is timing. Alleged planners did not pick New Year's Eve by accident. Midnight comes with an ambient noise floor of fireworks, sirens, crowds, and split attention. In that environment, even a small number of coordinated incidents can feel larger, spread faster on social media, and strain response routing. The second overlooked factor is how prevention changes behavior on both sides. When authorities publicize a foiled plot, it can deter copycats. It can also teach future plotters what triggered intervention. That is why officials tend to describe threats broadly while holding back specifics. The public should expect the court process, not press conferences, to provide the clearest picture of what was actually done, what was merely discussed, and what can be proven beyond reasonable doubt. Why this matters. Southern California is directly affected because it is where authorities say the targets were located and where major holiday gatherings are common. But the broader implications are national. New Year's Eve is a high-risk calendar event everywhere, and logistics infrastructure exists in every major metro. Short term, the impact is psychological and operational. People will ask whether celebrations are safe, and agencies will reassess staffing, patrol patterns, and rapid response procedures for crowded events. Long-term, this case feeds into a larger trend: domestic threat landscapes that are fragmented, ideologically diverse, and operationally small-scale, making them harder to detect with traditional counterterrorism models built for hierarchical organizations. Concrete events to watch next include initial and follow on court hearings, detention decisions, and any superseding filings that add charges or detail the alleged planning timeline. If prosecutors file additional charges, that will signal they believe the evidence supports a broader theory than the initial complaint. Real-world impact. A warehouse supervisor in the Inland Empire plans holiday shifts around predictable surges. After a case like this, management may add bag checks, vehicle screening, and extra security posts. The workday gets slower and more tense, even if nothing happens. A city events coordinator in Los Angeles reviews permits for New Year's gatherings. The new priority becomes redundancy, backup evacuation routes, faster communication to vendors, and closer coordination with police and fire departments. A small business owner in Orange County depends on overnight deliveries for inventory. Even rumors of threats can lead to route changes, delayed shipments, and higher carrier fees during peak periods. A nurse in London watching the news sees another reminder that public celebrations can be targeted anywhere. The personal impact is subtle but real. A slightly tighter grip on a phone in a crowd, a little more scanning of exits, and a new calculation about where to stand when fireworks start. Road ahead. Federal authorities say they stopped a New Year's Eve attack plan before any device was fully built or deployed. The arrests may prevent harm, but they also open a familiar argument about prevention, proof, and how narrowly the state can focus its tools. The fork in the road is between targeted disruption based on specific, provable steps and broader pressure to expand surveillance and suspicion. The trade-off is speed versus precision. The next signals to watch are procedural and concrete. What evidence appears in filings, whether new charges are added, and how judges respond to arguments about danger, intent, and capability. That is where this story will begin to resolve from allegation into accountable fact.